Alright YouTube, it's time for the Occult, video 94 on Enchantment, Consecration, Desecration, associated topics. Now, Enchantment, typically when you encounter the use of this general idea, it's talking about the enchanting of a book, a sword, some sort of, object, something that's portable. As opposed to consecration or desecration that also can be used in terms of a place, a setting, for instance, a ritual chamber, a sacred grove, something of that nature. It can be, it doesn't have to be, but it can be where a ritual is being performed. Christians do this, by the way. They consecrate their altars. They bless the water and so forth. It's a form of enchantment. When a priest blesses a bowl of what is essentially tap water or something like that, it's not particularly special, in order to imbue it with some special power. That's a form of enchantment. The main differentiation made is that when enchantment is done in a more authentic occult sense, there's no request issued to some sort of external deity. It's either a command, you command the forces to be within this sword or something like this, or else you're using an inner power. You're using, especially in new forms of occultism, the power tends to be within, or the person is a conduit. They're able to control it as opposed to having to ask some external deity. Internal versus external magic is something that I've been fascinated with for some time. I am going to release another edition, by the way, of my work on that topic. So I'm not going to advertise it here, because I want it in a better format and so forth. It would be nice to see, fully completed, fully done, proper page size. That would be kind of nice. Enchantment, though, typically what's being done is some sort of material. For instance, if you read The Greater Key of Solomon, enchantments, consecrations of various sorts, are called out over the ritual swords that the master and the disciples or their adepts are carrying, over the book itself, over the incense, over the candles, over the magical circles used for summoning or other rites, over literally everything. The virgin parchment or unborn parchment, which I should probably make a video just about that book, apart from the literary series, just because it's so weird at times. It comes from multiple Solomonic cycle manuscripts, from Mathers, of course, and de Lawrence. But consecration is sort of the positive counterpart, and desecration's the negative counterpart. Now, I write about this in Fruits of Eden in brief. There are certain areas of nature, especially. You could think of it as like the aura or the feeling of parts of a city. You go to any city, you'll find places that feel vibrant, they feel alive, artsy, colorful, energetic, whatever you want to term it. And then there are other parts that are sort of low-key, and then there are parts that you would say are a little bit spooky or a little bit seedy and feel a little bit unsafe. For instance, you go up to Burlington. I notice this more there than here. In Rutland, everything sort of jives with me. I like my hometown. Yeah, we've got problems, but at the same time, I like it. In Burlington, though, you go around UVM, very, very energetic. You go anywhere from UVM to the downtown, very energetic. You go down to the shorefront, it's slightly more serene, but also it's quite positive. You go up to parts of the old North End, and it feels a little bit more run down, not unsafe. You go to the South End, that's when you start getting more of the crime, or parts of South Burlington around the airport. That's when it looks a little bit less safe, a little bit less family-friendly, you could say. And then there's an area between, my favorite area of the city was right between Pearl Street and the main east-west route that goes through South Burlington, about 3 blocks west of UVM, I believe. And that area there, it's got an old graveyard. There's a little sliver of it that's down below the rest, 30 or 40 feet down a hill, right next to a main road. It's just a weird area. At night, it's very peaceful, lots of crickets and stuff. People have high hedges along the road in front of their homes. It looks Victorian to me, and I happen to like it. In the same sense, desecration could be thought of as that sort of same energy applied to a location by will alone for that express purpose. It's not like a rundown neighborhood has become rundown. Its energy value has changed because of other things going on. It's overwhelmed by drug dealers, there's a gang active there, it's half abandoned and crumbling. People didn't necessarily go there with the purpose in mind to make it an abysmal spot to be. Any more than people moving in, they're like upper class, and they have the nice lawns and so forth, moving into an area, and it feels, perhaps nicer. They didn't necessarily do it just for the purpose of beautification, for the purpose of consecrating it to be good in aura or something like that. It's just a byproduct of their normal actions. With consecration or desecration, though, it's willed. The church is consecrated. They'd be decorated with art and other sort of iconography and things of that nature to give it an overall energy. A temple would be the same, a synagogue, anything like that, a mosque. It would be decorated in such a way that the prevailing culture responsible for the architecture, the art, and so forth would find it appropriate. That's why you find a significant difference in the way a church here in New England looks and the way a church in southern Texas looks. Now, you go to a Catholic church here and a Catholic church down there. They're not built the same. They don't contain the same, necessarily, iconography. They're just different in almost every possible way, other than the fact that the same liturgy is being read. The priest is dressed the same. Everything else, though, stylistically is different. And yet it serves the same purpose for two different cultures. And culture is important when we're talking about the occult, the way one group of people responds to a location or an object that's been used ceremonially, and the way that another culture will are not necessarily the same. The sort of old dead tree, sort of twisted old oak with ragged bits of cloth hanging off of it that might be used by one culture in the cultus arborum style sense for alleviating illness might be seen by some other group of people as very, very spooky and intimidating. The architecture of one culture that's considered very beautiful, very serene, might be considered not to be so by another. You look at like the difference between postmodern architecture, or like brutalist architecture, and then something more classical. And obviously the people that find that attractive, that like postmodernism in an experimental sense, are not going to appreciate classical architecture. People who prefer, as I do, I will say, classical architecture won't necessarily respond positively towards like brutalism or something. There's an old brutalist building at UVM. I'll use another example. The science, the chemistry and biology labs are contained there, and as well as a couple of smaller lecture halls. It's a brutalist building. I think it's completely hideous. But whoever designed it thought that it looked pretty good. It's sort of, the 40s and 50s era weird slab construction. It's just, to me, it looks like an abomination, but there are people who think that it looks pretty cool. It looks futuristic, or it looks Sovietistic, or something like that. I just don't like it. I prefer the buildings on the green that were sort of Victorian looking. A lot of soaring architecture, lots of red brick, high slant on the roof sort of stuff. That's the sort of gargoyles. That's the sort of stuff that I like. So, if you intend to consecrate something, you need to do it, I believe, outside of prescribed ritualism. If you're doing your own ritualism, as increasingly people are, if you intend to consecrate or desecrate a thing, or a location, or something or a person potentially, the ritual has to be in sync with your thoughts. With your culture as well, to a great extent, because otherwise it's not going to have any significant psychological impact. And if we're operating from the assumption that the occult at least includes the psychological, in the sense that the person has to be in the right frame of mind to perform any ritualism, or you can look at it as purely spiritual, it doesn't really matter which opinion you have, you still have to be surrounded by, in that ritual setting, the things which you would find of import for your ritualism. For instance, I don't go around wearing a black robe because to me it's just kind of weird and corny and Hollywood-esque. I do, however, like the more new style of like gothic clothing. I have ordered, and hopefully it fits me because the size was a little bit different on it than what I'm used to. I have ordered something that basically is a good stand-in for a wizard's robe, and I'll be wearing that pretty soon in upcoming occult YouTube videos. Hopefully it fits well. I think it will. I've also got some swords coming, which is going to be even funnier. So, preface to this before people see it, so that you can understand where I'm coming from. It is a Halloween costume. Expensive one. It's also like, it's a woolen cloak. It's going to be comfy, it's going to be warm. It's something that I'll wear because I like looking at it, honestly. But I'm also going trick-or-treating with my niece. And so I need a costume. Well, I'm not going to spend the same amount of money on, halfway decent wizard cloak. So I just got this, and I'm going to carry my wooden staff and my sword, and I'll be a necromancer or something like that. It just works. It's just what I want to do. So yeah, enchantment typically involves something portable. Consecration or desecration, not necessarily so, but it needs to be held in mind, the culture of the person performing these things. Otherwise, you come to no real good results. It would be like somebody from the middle of Africa reading a European grimoire may not understand why all the inclusions are there, and vice versa. If I were to read something from Indonesian tribal spiritual forms, some spell book from 1,000 years ago from Indonesia or something, a lot of that, to me, as a Westerner, may not make complete sense. Academically, I could work my way through it, but as far as using it in a ritual format, a lot of it would come off as perhaps very Hollywood-esque or something like that. It would sound like something out of an Indiana Jones movie, as far as the sort of tribal, shaman traditions would go. And so that would have to be kept in mind. Before you study any form of occultism, you have to be self-aware of your own enculturation, number one. You don't have to ignore it. You don't have to go against it, or against anything that you feel or believe in. You don't have to do that, but you do have to keep it in mind that that bias, which is what it is there when you're approaching other spiritual forms. Both the Christian and Islamic colonists to various parts of the world and the third world sort of tribal people that they encountered thought that one another's spirituality was rather strange. So people need to keep that in mind. That's about all. Peace out.